Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the Mobile IT Community of Interest, the monthly meeting for September. Thanks very much for joining us today. Before we get started, I would like to review how to use the GoToWebinar system in order to optimize your experience today. You've all been put on default mute due to lots of participants on the call. You're encouraged to please forward any questions that come up using the questions tab at the end. There are some questions in the form of a poll within the presentation. We will read out the questions at the end, as I mentioned, and we can identify who's asking the question in order to foster participation and interaction between the attendees. If you'd like to remain anonymous, please say so in the question. I mentioned about live polls. We've got 4 of those today, and we'd encourage your participation in that. The information that we received in the previous presentations, the information feedback has been pretty good, that we've been able to put and use in some of the work that we've been doing on the projects and research. If you want to minimise the dashboard, just use the arrow, the orange arrow at the top, allow you to move around the webinar. Again, thank you very much for joining us. We'll now start the presentation. I'm Stuart Young. I represent Fiatech in Europe and the Middle East. On behalf of all of us at Fiatech, I'd like to thank you for joining us today on the latest instalment of the Community of Interest, the monthly meeting. Today's presenter is Neill Pawsey from Crossrail, who will present a use case on Bluetooth low energy beacons to support safety management at site. Before we get to the presentation, I'd like to take a minute to introduce Fiatech and this Community of Interest to those who are not members of Fiatech and are new to this concept, and who are willing to participate in the community. Fiatech is a member-based organisation with an objective of accelerating the deployment of technology in the capital projects world. We have nearly 100 mobilization partners and companies, including subject matter experts, and we welcome new members to participate in all our activities. Our goal is to lead global development and adoption of innovative practices through the integrative view of construction work. Nothing synthesizes this view better than the perspective of our members. And as Craig Larson from Oracle expressed, Fiatech's vision enables us to deliver capabilities and products that will support the entire life cycle of capital assets rather than just one component. If you are interested in joining or would like more information, please drop me a note at the email address at the end. A lot of people ask, why mobile IT? What's the interest? At the core of Fiatech's interest, we're creating this mobile community of interest. Mobile technology has clearly enhanced project performance, but we believe to date it's only scratched the surface. There are still many opportunities for the industry to increase productivity through improved project information flow. As I mentioned, in Fiatech we strive to solve practical problems and the challenges associated to implementing mobile technologies which are of a practical nature. As a community, we hope to realise these potentials, and with your combined help we can make a real difference to the industry and increase productivity. As such, the objective of the community is to bring together project stakeholders, their ideas, and improve efficiency in the field using mobile IT, and share that knowledge to implement those ideas across the industry. Participants in the community will get together in 2 ways. Firstly, through monthly meetings such as this one, where all the participants come together to learn about specific applications in use. And second, participants get together through the subgroup meetings, which focus on specific topics of interest to the community and in which participants may carry out work inside their organisations to advance the knowledge on implementation of mobile systems. The deliverables from the community developed by the subgroups would include reports, pilot tests or use cases of the work being carried out. These can give insight into the benefits, challenges and costs involved in the use of new technologies and applications. Furthermore, the work inside the community can become Fiatech-wide projects through formal project proposals. This would increase the scale of a given project and involve all Fiatech membership. The community is a joint effort between Fiatech and Comet. Comet is a UK-based organisation. Comet is an acronym for Construction Opportunities for Mobile IT. As I say, it's UK-based. It's been around 11 years, and its aim is to learn from experience to deliver measurable business benefits in terms of adoption of mobile technologies. As such, this partnership supports the work and objectives of this community. Today, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have Neill Pawsey from Crossrail as our main presenter. To introduce Neill, Neill leads a subject matter expert team supporting Crossrail project delivery and a technical assistance for site-based contract teams for CAD, document control, GIS systems, asset data management, interoperability and mobile IT. Also providing a service to help efficient management, monitoring, support and delivery of timely, accurate information generated by the project into and beyond the operation of the physical asset. In addition to this, Neill leads Crossrail's BIM in Delivery Working Group, BIDWIG. This is a collaborative group comprising Crossrail project delivery teams, partners and Tier 1 contractors. This group works to ensure that information value, quality and integrity is maintained and not compromised as it is passed between organisations and applications during the delivery of the project. Neill has over 25 years experience working in the civil engineering and construction industry. He's undertaken many challenging technical leadership roles during this time for a variety of organisations and projects, and he's passionate and focused on driving improved efficiencies through the use of innovative technology. He has a Bachelor of Science degree with honours from Anglia Ruskin University. He studied Innovative and Collaborative Engineering at Loughborough University and is a member of the British Computer Society, the UK's Institute of Civil Engineers and the Chartered Institute of Building. There will be a question and answer section at the end of Neill's presentation to allow participants to ask any questions to the presenter or the organisers of the community. As we mentioned before, your questions will be read through during this section with your name, organisation and position, again, to foster participation in the community. If you want to remain nameless, or anonymous rather, please say in the question. After the question session, we will make some monthly announcements regarding upcoming meetings and subgroup sessions. So Neill, I'll now pass it over to you. Thank you very much, Neill.
Thanks, Stuart. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation to present today. I'm going to talk about a project that has been running for about 2 months. We're about 60% of the way through, and I just wanted to make that clear that we're not quite at the end of testing, but I'm happy to talk you through where we've got to so far and the premise of what we're trying to test. I will be presenting a more detailed output of results of this at the Fiatech event to be held in London later this year, so I would encourage you to come along if you're local, and if you're not local, come along and hear, and you'll hear some more results once we've concluded some of the practical tests on site. This project was actually conceived early this year. It was an idea that came out of one of our construction sites at Bond Street Main Station. It was funded by Crossrail's innovation program called Innovate 18, which is an excellent idea that was conceived about 2 years ago. It's a fund and also a knowledge base and a scheme to encourage, cultivate, foster innovative ideas and bring them forward, hopefully to projects that will ultimately benefit Crossrail in delivery, but also as part of the legacy that we can share beyond Crossrail and projects that follow us. It's a proof of concept trial. It's about £59,000 UK worth of investment we received from the Crossrail Innovation Fund. It's an 8-month duration project. It'll deliver a report. The date says October 2014. I think that's more likely to be November now. It's led by our principal supplier, a company called 3 Squared. It's also supported by myself and led by myself as project manager through our BIM and delivery working that Stuart described earlier. It has participation in a collaborative way right across the project. So we've got members of the actual delivery team at our C42 station site, including the originator of the idea, and that was a gentleman called Tom O'Keefe, who's now moved on to another project, but this was his baby. This will be his legacy. We have some oversight management from our Crossrail IT team, because they're putting the money in. We have some oversight from the Crossrail Innovation Programme as well. So to get going, I think we have a question to ask you on the poll. So I'm going to question to you now, and then Stuart next is going to be a poll so that you can ask a question. But we'd really like to know of the following five main constraint to using mobile should be active now, and the answers are connectivity, data safety, health and safety measures, end users and work process, or others that are not applicable within this list. So please answer now. Okay, keep the results coming in. Some interesting answers there. I know which one I would answer, and interesting seeing the results now. It's probably agreeing with what I think. Okay, I think we're going to close the poll now. We can now share the results with you. So I would have answered end users. That would have been my answer. Those of you that know me know that I have a saying that people are a problem, and Mr. Mike at Crossrail is spent managing people. I say that I've become less of an engineer and more of a behavioural psychologist, and I think that supports that. Okay, I'll continue on with the presentation. So first, back to basics. I mean, what is an iBeacon? And the reason why I'm interested in this project kind of goes back to my career and my history. So sort of 8 or 9 years ago, we had an accident in which we had a fatality, sadly, on a project that we were on. And that was a contributing factor, was because somebody who was very experienced put themselves in a position of danger. In this case, they put themselves very close to operating machinery. They knew they shouldn't have been there. We don't know why that person did what he did, but he lost his life. There was a health situation. All of them. My CEO was very affected by it. We were a very close-knit group. And he challenged me, I was the head of IT for that organisation at the time, to come up with a solution, technological solution that would be able to monitor people and prevent them from putting themselves in harm's way. And that was in 2 ways. And obviously bring themselves into proximity with dangerous moving machinery, but also putting themselves into zones and areas of the site where they should be excluded from. And the most obvious example in my career was in highways work, was segregating live moving traffic from the operatives who were working on the road itself. And we tried a number of different techniques back then, 8 years ago. We partnered with a company called UBSense, who use ultra-wideband sensors, and we were able to use those sensors mounted on telegraph poles around the site. We could model the site in 3D, we could put sensors in people's hard hats, and we could monitor people as they moved around the site. So technically it was a success. Commercially, and it's always sad if you have to put a price tag on health and safety, but it was non-viable in the sense that mounting the sensors, calibrating the sensors, power over Ethernet cables, calibration cables in a dynamic site environment full of concrete and steel and water, which all affect the propagation of radio waves, meant that it was just not viable at all. So we concluded saying we could do it, but with the technology at the time, we couldn't do it in a cost-effective way. Now we have the advent of new technologies, and there are many ways that you can monitor it. Photogrammetry, there's enhanced GIS systems, and sensor technology has moved on apace. What really interested us was the advent of iBeacon technology, which are in essence low-power, low-cost transmitters that can simply notify a device of its presence. It was a concept that was launched with Apple's iOS 7. It requires Bluetooth 4, so if your smartphone is Bluetooth 4 capable, it can interact with an iBeacon. They are purported to have a range of up to 50 meters and a battery life of about 1 year. If you have an iPhone with iOS 7 on it and it's Bluetooth capable, your phone can also be an iBeacon. So what's the well, could we use or can we use these Bluetooth Low Energy beacons? There's a little picture of some of the examples there, and I'll come to that in a little bit more detail later, to set up simply a local positioning network, i.e. GPS on a small scale, but also below ground as opposed to above ground. So, why not just use GPS? Well, we can get higher accuracy with the Bluetooth beacons, and the figures here are indicative. These are things that we're going to test. This is not me saying that it actually does that. This is part of the proof of concept trial, and they will work underground in the environment shown in the picture, or inside a building, which for a project like Crossrail, where we are by our nature tunnelling and below ground, is of distinct interest to us. I've just lost the picture this end, guys, so bear with me. Okay, so what's the plan? We want to work with our technical partner in a short-scale proof of concept trial to develop software that will be able to manage zones on a construction site, and also to create an application that will sit on a mobile device that will augment the performance of the capacity of that device if it interacts with the zones. So some examples might be exclusion zones. So if somebody moves into that exclusion zone, you'll know if they've been there. You will be warned if you're moving into proximity of it, and you'll be warned if you violate that space. There may be other areas, like areas of high sound levels and other hazards, and you could be warned of that. Also, it could be used for mobile device management. We've just been through a huge program in Crossrail, which I think I presented on previously, where we're rolling out mobile devices to site. We've had some health and safety challenges around that. We've had to work with our Tier 1 contractors to develop safe use policies and PPE and other guidance process to make sure they can be safely used. But if we can use iBeacons to police the use of those devices, an example being that if I walk into a certain area where I am not allowed to use a mobile device, it will disable the device. It may provide me with a notification. It may restrict functionality. I'll talk a little bit more detail about that capability in the use cases we're looking at in a moment. Once we've developed the software, been through those early phases of development, we're coming towards that end now. We want to go through a series of actual site trials, and phase 1 will actually be in a site office, which doesn't sound particularly challenging, but it gives us an opportunity to test zone management and the capability of the devices and calibrating the devices and working out whether we can make them accurate, and we can do that in a safe, accessible office environment. Then phase 2, once we're absolutely sure that we've satisfied most of the requirements that we set out at the beginning of the project, we'll move on to a live construction site. In this case, we'll be going down into what we call the main concrete box of the West Ticket Hall in Bond Street, at 2 levels, so we're almost 30 metres below ground. And then at the end of the project, we will provide a report that will simply address the question that whether this technology is viable for construction. We'll see the potential. From what we've heard, we think it could possibly work. But this will add to knowledge, this will add to industry knowledge, and if it's a success, this might be something that we would consider rolling out at a wider scale in Crossrail. And of course, if we can use this technology to save lives as part of our Target Zero campaign, then that's probably all the motivation we need. So we haven't just blundered into this environment. This isn't something that by chance we think is a good idea. We know that iBeacons have some provenance in other industries. So for example, we are aware of early trials that were done in retail with Macy's and Apple stores in the United States. Most smartphones are iBeacon ready, and major store chains are now looking at iBeacon-based applications, and for a number of cases, not just simply location, but it could be for checking in coupons. It could be used for what I consider particularly annoying proximity marketing. As you're walking past a store, it knows you're in the proximity of that store, so advertising can be targeted at you. And it could also be, has also been looked at for use for contactless payment. So we've looked into those use cases, we've looked into the results, and we've seen the success. So now we want to see if that's transferable into an industry like construction, like capital projects. The examples in health and safety, as I'd sort of previously described, and actually what you're seeing there on the left-hand side is an early wireframe, and I can show you some more of that later, is that as an actual view of one of our construction sites. We want to be able to delineate and manage and mark out safe areas of work, other work areas where we may want to restrict functionality or restrict access. We may want to restrict that to certain applications. Maybe cameras are disabled. We may not disable Wi-Fi if we have it in a particular area. And then probably the fundamental one is that we want to highlight exclusion zones, areas of high risk where all functionality may be disabled, or at the very least you'll be warned if you're moved into it, and violations of that area can be reported. And one important thing I want to say here is that we're not looking at this as a technology that's going to take over from existing processes and procedures, because we have very good ones on this project, but we certainly see this technology augmenting and supporting existing processes. An example of which could be exception reporting. So if you're a supervisor, you have access to that information. You can get that from Health and Safety Manager, who has control of the back-end software systems. He can then call people into his office and simply say, Joe, you were in that area 5 times today, and you were in one particular area, you were there for 15 minutes. That is in contravention of policy. Here is the evidence, and then I can take action accordingly. So at this stage, we think it's probably a step too far to push this to a system that takes over and we become wholly reliant on. I think that would be dangerous. There are also other interesting privacy checks. We're going to start tagging people. One of the examples you'll hear is you can see a wristband in this example here. So there's lots of wearable technology you can have now. That could be a tag that could monitor location in real time. Our operatives going to allow us to do that. I think we would face severe challenge there, but if we pushed it from a health and safety point of view and we pushed it from a enforcement point of view, then we may have some traction. So on that basis, indicatively in our consultations with the site teams, we can see that that's perhaps going to work. So we have our second poll question now. So we're just going to push that for you. So I'm going to read that question for you in a minute once Stuart launches the poll. Just having 1 or 2 technical problems. Stuart's computer has decided to go off and have a cup of coffee. So just bear with us, folks. So while we're waiting for Stuart to wake up, I'm going to read the question to you, see poll questions. So poll question 2 is, how has your organisation's safety strategy been adjusted to include mobile technology? This is something I'm quite keen to see the results for because of the efforts we've gone to. It's taken us sort of 2 years to work with our supply chain to evolve existing procedures and practices to a point where we think they work. The answers are, to has your organisation's safety strategy been adjusted to include mobile technologies, is mobile tools are simply not allowed. The use of mobile devices is limited to certain areas on site. We call that the sheep pen policy here at Crossrail. Supporting there are no restrictions on the use of mobile technologies or other applicable polls. Now, if you could just go ahead and answer that, that would be great. So we'll just give you a little bit more time. About 46% of you voted so far. Okay, so we're going to close the poll now. We're just going to publish those answers out to you. I think they're really interesting. None of you say that mobile tools are not allowed. I have to say on Crossrail there are still contractors that prohibit the use of the devices, and in some instances that's quite understandable given the nature of the work. The majority of the answers are saying, and this isn't surprising, is that the adequate cases and supporting tools are required. So that's really the approach that we've taken, is that we are managing by process and procedure. We're managing the devices as tools. 16% of you say there are no restrictions on the use of mobile technologies. That's really interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Okay, thanks, Stuart. We'll just press on with the presentation now. Okay. that we've used to define our sort of functional requirements, if you like. So if I'm a health and safety manager, I want the ability to set up spaces, I want the ability to manage zones, I want the ability to produce exception reports. I also want to be able to restrict device hardware, I want to restrict the software by a particular zone. I want to tag health and safety alerts to zones, so maybe there's an area where there's high sounds. I want to link zones to sound monitoring devices, define emergency exits, give people exit advice so that they can memorize them and use them in emergency situations. If I'm a site-based person, I want to receive safety alerts. I want to receive those in real time. I become close to, or I enter a restricted area, and I receive information relevant to my micro-location that might be of interest to me. Filling out forms is a really interesting one. So we've got some forms applications that we're developing here at Crossrail, and we're developing this idea of being context aware. So if we know who I am and you know where I am, you can pre-populate forms. And that's really interesting because that addresses some of the problems we had at Crossrail around culturally the difference between walking around a construction site with a clipboard, a piece of paper, and walking around with a mobile device. I happen to think there is no real difference, but I'm prepared to accept that mobile devices perhaps demand a bit more of your time, which is, for example, why some of our policies say that you have to use your mobile device stood still and under the guidance of supervisors, and you have to be trained to do so. I want to be alerted to dynamic danger zones, things that might change and as they change. If I'm a site supervisor, I might want the ability to remotely update zones via an app. If I'm a machine operative, I want to be alerted when somebody has entered a dangerous zone around my vehicle. So next poll question, how do users in your organisation perceive safety-related measures for using mobile tools? And the options are safety measures fully obstruct the use of those devices, they affect the functionality, the measures do not limit functionality, they are well suited for using mobile, or another answer. So begin voting now, please. So lots of other answers being generated here. So I'd say from what I'm seeing now, I have 45% of the votes, but keep going, is that most of the answers are kind of a common sense, what you would expect, that they are well suited for using mobility tools and devices. Probably the second one, other than the other not applicable, I'd like to explore that in a bit more detail, that they affect some functionality of the mobile devices. So we're going to share those results with you now. Okay, if you could hide that, Stuart, I'll carry on. So another example we're looking at is information retrieval. So we can filter, provide information. This is again sort of my contextually aware example, that I can present information to you from the main data sources that are applicable to your location and to who you are. And this idea of auto-population of forms to reduce admin, what we're finding is with our operatives is that they have the capability to fill all the forms in the field, but they tend to fill in things like they'll take a photograph, or they'll fill in just the information that they need, that they couldn't do elsewhere, and then they go and complete that operation in either a safe location or back at the office, and then they can send the information into the back-end systems. You could enforce quality checks to be performed at a specific location, for example. So if I'm a field engineer, I want to receive documents relative to a given context. I want the auto-population facility. I want to perhaps add a micro-location to photographs, as an example. The final one, which is probably a nice-to-have use case, and this is more around modelling and BIM examples. Real-time location is a real enabler. It's been a challenge for augmented reality. So if it could be used without time-consuming setup and acquisition times, perhaps Bluetooth low-energy beacons could be an enabling technology. We could possibly explore that. I could interact with my 3D model in a more effective way on site. I could update components and asset attributes based upon my location. So I think these are probably, within the context of this proof of concept, things that we might explore as value-added extras towards the end. So I'm just sharing with you here some early wireframes. We're in a series of fast sprints for development at the moment. There's 3 sprints during this phase. We've been through functional requirements. We've written a detailed system design, given that to the software solutions provider, and they've developed some wireframes. So here's an example of the portal. So this could show how you could manage and set up zones. So here's a wireframe of the app that possibly could come out the back end of this process. So some examples of a site plan being rendered onto a device showing you some potential hazards, fire exits, areas of high sound levels where a photograph has been taken, for example, and zones by colour that tell me whether it's a safe area to work, and then obviously showing my location relative to those areas. So poll question 4, final question. How often are end users in your organisation presented with wireframes or other types of prototypes when you go through a development? So the answers are: we use wireframes systematically. We've just begun to look at wireframes. It's rare that we use wireframes. Never, or another answer. So if you'd like to vote now, please. Okay, keep going. Okay, so I think we're going to close the poll now and show you the answers. So it looks like most of you are using wireframes. Other than that, it's a bit of a mix. Some of you are saying that it's rare, so it's a bit of a mixed bag, but interesting. Thank you. Okay, so just finishing off on the wireframes. So here's another example, where I could command the application to show me information, filter information out, show me emergency exits, show me PPE areas or PPE-free areas, slip trips, hazards, environmental issues, etc. So there's a lot of capability we could possibly drive out of this, and that kind of emerged from early Moscow analysis that we did as part of the functional requirements spec and the detailed system design. So one of the things we have actually done recently is look into the type of beacons that we might want to use, and our supplier went through an evaluation of a number of different types: Estimote, Blue Bar, Blue Cat, Gimbal Series 10 and the Gimbal Series 20 units. And the results of that for range testing, so that's picking up the average response that you're getting in communication between the 2 units, proved that the Gimbal series really came out top in our evaluations. And the Gimbal Series 20, which, no surprise, is a more heavy-duty unit with a more serious battery in it, we think it's probably going to be more applicable to a site environment. The V20 Gimbal series really provided us with the best ranging results, so that's likely to be the one that we use. Okay, just getting a message that maybe you're not seeing the slides right now, so apologies for that. So I'm just going to wind back a slide, I think, possibly. So these are the beacon types that we looked at, and these are some of the results that we had. So again, it was the Gimbal Series 20, which is probably the unit we'll test. That doesn't preclude the fact that we might want to test other units as part of the office trial, so that we can add a little bit more context to these results by the time we produce the final report. Currently, we're in the process of running some office testing. This isn't actually at one of our site offices, it's actually at our suppliers' offices. So this is really about understanding how the beacons are behaving, in terms of proximity, how they're reading where you are, how they're picking up whether you're close to one or close to another. We're also running lots of different tests in putting people and objects between us and the actual beacons themselves. So this is early sort of resilience testing. We're able now to sort of demark crude zones within the office and prove that when you walk into that area an action occurs, so there may be just a simple notification. We've also been able to test the fact that it picks up your proximity, so it knows when you're getting close. So that's pretty much where we are now. So we've been through some key stages. We've defined the project, we've outlined the solution, we've done some user stories, we've done some pilot definitions, we've come up with a detailed solution design. We moved quite rapidly through that. We're in our sprint phases now on build, doing some early testing. We'll move into our site pilot in October, and we'll conclude that by the end of the month, and then we'll look to produce the report by the end of November, which we'll be happy to share with the Fiatech community. So, sorry I can't share any other early results at this time. It's quite early in the project, but as I said, I will be presenting those more comprehensive results at the Fiatech event here in London at the end of October, so I'll have to see some of there. Otherwise, at this moment, I'll be able to happily answer whatever questions I can.
Thank you, Neil. Most enlightening. We have a number of questions, which I'm going to start with a question from Manny Golf of Arfard. Thank you, Manny, for your question. Problem-driven research is needed to design proper tools. Currently, most companies apply existing tools. Well, it should be the other way around. The development of the tools should be initiated by the constraints of the application. Neil, have you got a view on that one?
I agree. I knew Manny would come up with some comment. I was expecting a question from Manny, but it's being driven around at the moment. So, you know, we've got to develop some bespoke applications and applications of the technology to solve real problems on our sites. I agree.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Thank you for that one. The next question we've got is from Matthew Dina. It may be an issue on my end locally.
I think that's a technical
We'll ignore that. That's a technical issue. That's, yeah, okay. I must admit that's the first one we've had. Oh, maybe we've got another one. Yeah. Okay, the question we've got here, what type of location resolution do you expect to have with this setup, i.e. 3 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters, etc.?
I hope to get a little bit better than 3 meters actually. We think that we could possibly get it to 100 millimeter accuracy. That would be good in terms of, you know, violating or picking up a violation of one of those areas. I think 3 meters is not going to cut it. It would, you know, would it with you near, or would it tell you that you actually crossed the line? So, however skeptical I might remain about getting that resolution, we're determined to test it. So yeah, I mean less than 3 meters.
Okay, thank you, Neil. That was from Kirk Johnson. Thank you, Kirk. The next question I've got is again from Manny. Wireframe does not add much value. BIM is all about the semantics embedded in the model. Proper tools are needed to allow access to the semantic. Neil?
Well, you know, the wireframes are really just about the sprint development to get us an idea of what the toolset will look like for managing it, and it gives an early chance for our practitioners like our health and safety managers and the guys on site to have a look at what they might be using. From that point of view, I think we found that quite useful. It helped us get buy-in as much as anything from the end user, but I wouldn't disagree with Manny's point beyond that.
No, thanks very much for that, Neil. Any more questions from anybody? I don't see any more appearing on the screen, but just give it a minute. So, no, I've got no more there. But if anybody thinks of any more, we've got a few more minutes. I'll just go on to the next. Just go on to the next slide. Which is about the upcoming events. Okay, we've got next week, we've got the Fiatech members meeting. Takes place September 29th, October the 1st. That's taking place in Philadelphia. It is featuring a workshop on mobile IT to discuss the challenges and solutions and upcoming work related to field research. We'll also discuss some of the group outputs as well that we've had this year. Most importantly, during the workshop, we will discuss some challenges and issues and some of the topics that have been discussed as well. We've had 8, 9 altogether this year, and some of them have been most enlightening. A lot of follow-up questions from attendees, and I understand that 1 or 2 organisations have put mobile strategies into place since coming along and learning from what we've delivered. The other event that we've got coming up is the Efficiency Through Digital Projects. That's a joint venture between Fiatech and Comet. That takes place at the end of October in London. That'll look at latest R&D projects, technologies and work processes. We will have cutting-edge views from industry leaders and how the people and the technology in the construction can engage and create more efficiency. We would encourage you to visit the website, have a look at the agenda, and participate. Come along and have a look. I don't think there's any more questions come up. Wait a minute, there's another question arrived. Let me just see what we've got here. Yeah, we've got another couple of questions. This one's from Jason Scott. Hello, Jason. Question is there a fundamental difference in concern about mobile device use on site between the US and Europe, given that the polls showed few organisations were banning their use on site?
Not sure I can answer that one, but it's a good question, Jason. I'll see you tomorrow and talk about it. I can only speak from what I see in Crossrail, and I saw a very mixed picture in terms of attitudes about the use of mobile devices. That is fast changing. We've moved from a position over 2 years from a lot of scepticism, a lot of resistance, a lot of fear that mobile devices would introduce some really key hazards into a quite dangerous environment already, to the fact and the recognition that, you know, perhaps those thoughts were based upon the use of cell phones and mobile phones and not the recognition that what this actually is a tool and a device. And I think once you start putting it in those contexts, then you get some slightly different answers. So I can't speak from this perspective. It's been a while since I've been working there, so I don't really know, but certainly something that would be interesting to explore.
Yeah, I've had a little more involvement with that, 1 or 2 of the US-based organisations, and there is a little bit more of a difference. In the UK, the devices are treated in a lot of cases as phones and have been banned. There is a different view where supervisors and foremen are allowed to use them in certain places and have much more freedom than what we've seen here. But it is approaching this lockdown where people are considering the elements of safety. Okay, the next...
There's been a follow-up from Kirk, actually, which
Yes.
probably I didn't make it clear about the 100mm resolution. I was actually talking about the precise location within multiple beacons and not the resolution in terms of distance to a single beacon. That's part of the range testing that we've been doing to work out, you know, whether we can get that accurate reading and to what range from that beacon, and how many beacons do we need to cover a particular zone. So that's something that we're going to be exploring as part of the testing. But no, that 100mm resolution really in terms of your location, using the beacons to obtain that.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Can I just move on to the next slide? Yeah. The next meeting we've got is October the 15th. We regularly meet third Wednesday of each month. Apologising for changing the last one. We had an issue with a presenter that couldn't join us when we needed to, but usually, regularly, we work on the third Wednesday of each month, 9 AM US time, minus 6 GMT. So please put a date in your diary for the next one. I'd like to say thank you very much for everybody for joining us. We are available. Contact us through the usual social media channels. We look forward to having you on the next session. Thanks very much for joining us. I don't see any more questions. So thanks very much for Neil.
And you're welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much to Fernando for his participation and help. And we'll see you all on the next one. Thank you very much.